Listen, at the end of the day, you have the Canadian consumer struggling right now, and you have the Canadian government doing what they do best, protecting another industry. And really, I never thought that it was as bad as it is. The more you pay attention, the more you realize how bad this is. We got cell phones, banking, gas stations, add tomatoes to the list now. All of these entities that have such a share of wallet out of the Canadian consumer are all colluding, and they're all doing it with the help and guidance of the federal government. The one thing that surprises me is the level of apathy or indifference that Canadians seem to exhibit towards it. And it may be just that, like, we're beaten down, right? And like, how do you overcome this, right? Every single major industry is an oligopoly or is controlled by, one company. They seem to be working hand in hand with the federal government. It's just starting to get so scary. How do you break free of it? I see it, right? I can tell you how this is solved. The problem is it's a difficult problem to solve, and it has to happen between the company or the entity that wants to try to solve it and the consumer, right? We see it in the mortgage space, right? When I started doing mortgages, we were at about like 5 to 10% of mortgages in Canada were being done by mortgage brokers. As a result, the discount available to the posted rate, and this is like the Bank of Canada did a study on this. Matt will post a link to the study either there or there or there or here. And your job is to subscribe to the channel because you love the content. Okay. That's our deal here. Okay. But I'm going to tell you, Bank of Canada, at the time when I first, young mortgage broker entering into the business, Bank of Canada issued this report, and it said it was a commentary on a previous period where trust companies and banks were competing for mortgages in Canada. So over the 70s and 80s, we had TD and then we had Canada Trust. Well, there were many, many trust companies. Those trust companies created competition in the mortgage space. The discount from the posted rate at the Canadian banks became very significant. And the profitability on mortgages by the Canadian banks was being eroded by those trust companies. And what did the trust companies do? They didn't really have technology. They just had branches, and they had a customer focus, and they had a real kind of folksy, hands-on approach to dealing with people. And they were really just doing one thing, right? They were taking savings and lending money out. The old trust company, George Bailey, G Shucks kind of model of banking. They were doing it so well that they were able to do it more profitably than the banks, and they were able to erode the bank's equity and create competition. And at a certain point, all of the banks made a decision almost in lockstep, and they bought up all of the trust companies. And within 12 months, the profit on mortgages skyrocketed because there were no more competitors. The banks know how to compete with each other. That's why there's only 5 of them. They all sit in a room together, and 5.5. Okay. National Bank's coming on strong. CIBC's coming down a little bit. There's 6 banks. Let's call it 6 banks. Soon National might replace CIBC. Those banks know how to operate together. They're not great at operating when they have another threat coming in. So I saw that study when I first became a mortgage broker, and my comment at the time, when I really shouldn't even have had a comment because I was a mortgage broker for a year, my comment was that I think that mortgage brokers can do the same in this industry if more people start using mortgage brokers. And sure enough, now I think we're at about 30 to 35% of Canadian consumers that use mortgage brokers. And if you look along the same timeline, you'll see the same thing happening. As mortgage brokers continue to enter the market and continue to shop for consumers, consumers get better and better rates. They get a little more picky. Mortgage finance companies came in to offer more options, and the bank's profits begin to erode again. I'll do that with a caveat because over this past time period, when the Liberal government kind of first came into power, they abolished CMHC's ability to provide portfolio insurance on mortgages. And this is a little bit complicated and nuanced, but what it did was essentially it eliminated competition for Canadians who have mortgages that are either on a home that's in excess of $1 million or who have a lot of equity in their home. And this is going to sound really, really dumb when I say this. It's going to sound counterintuitive, but hear me out. If you are a Canadian with a $2 million house and a $500,000 mortgage, you know what I'm talking about. You're paying more in interest than a Canadian who has a $500,000 home with a $25,000 equity stake in it. So someone that has only 5% equity in their home has a much better mortgage rate than someone who has 50% equity, 75% equity in their home. And the reason for that is the Canadian government abolished this portfolio insurance product. And they said the insurance that the government provides through CMHC will not be available to any home that's in excess of $1 million or where the borrower holds a bunch of equity. And as a result, the Canadian banks don't have to compete as fiercely against mortgage finance companies who rely on that portfolio insurance or the CMHC insurance to run their books of business because they don't have a balance sheet the way the banks have a balance sheet. All you need to know as a consumer is that if we were to chart the competitiveness and the profitability of mortgages, it would have increased to the detriment of the Canadian consumer at the point that the Liberal government first came in. And if you remember our former finance minister, Bill Morneau, he came in, I tell you something, right under his arm or in his briefcase. He maybe had 2 copies of it. He had a playbook that was written for him by the Canadian banks. He stepped in there, and I tell you something, I bet you every major chairman and CEO of the Canadian banks, they had a party the day Bill Morneau went in as a Minister of Finance. Geez, I wonder why the Liberals are still in control. They're pleasing every single major corporate master. So does that have something to do with why they're still in control, you think? I don't know, Matt.